So I think that every Christian scholar would agree that their Messiah figure needs to be without sin based on their understanding. But I have seen where things are very questionable about Jesus. So the question is, was Jesus sinless? That was the question. And it's repeated, of course, here, but I want you guys to get your head wrapped around it because there's so many things that are required of the Messiah. And if you really want to keep clinging to the feet of Jesus, you really need to learn a lot about what the Messiah's role is and is not, actually. Was Jesus sinless?
Like I was saying, they want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to say, all men are sinners, men sin, people sin, we're all sinners, it's a broken world, broken. And then they want to say that Jesus was a human. Okay? But then they want to say that Jesus, the human, was also God. It's circular reasoning. Jesus didn't sin because Jesus was God. God can't die, but Jesus died. Well, that was only the human part. Human sacrifice, God calls it abomination. Oh, but he was also God. It's circular reasoning. And that's what they're doing here. They're saying that Jesus was completely human, and then they'll say, oh, but he never sinned. But if all men sin, then that has to include Jesus, because Jesus was a human. So, to me, it's very strange how they do that. It's circular reasoning, and it's having your cake and eating it too.
Okay.
All right. But he asked first of all, in his question, he called Jesus the Christ, which is automatically Christian. So he's a devoted Christian. And he's trying to say that Jesus never sinned, okay, but clearly he did. All right. He was not sinless. And I'm just making references. I'm not going to cite chapter and verse. I think most people are going to be very well aware of what I'm referring to. Okay. He destroyed private property that was not his own.
Oink, oink.
Oink, oink for one, but that's not the only one.
Oh, destroying the temple, turning the tables
you think
over
a
in the
fig
temple.
tree in the middle of the middle of nowhere isn't going to be owned by somebody?
That's true too, and well, actually, maybe not, but the temple tables and the tables in the temple will belong to the temple. And
Yes, so
those.
he was cruel to animals.
Yeah,
he destroyed private property, and nowhere in the text does he say he did anything for the owners.
Right.
Okay. He enticed other people to sin, which makes him a sinner too.
Do tell.
So, well, go into the town and get a donkey or two donkeys, depends on whose version you want to read, and bring them back to here and say, my master has need of them. I don't think it says anything about returning the donkeys to the owners once they were finished being used. Okay. He killed a fruit tree. What does our Bible say about trees? When do you need trees the most? You need trees the most when you're making war against a city, and you need the trees for weapons. And it says, when you go against a city, leave the fruit trees alone. Okay. A woman comes to him and says, I need your help. And he won't help her until she proves that she has faith, or until she proves that she has the right faith. Since when is that? And you want to say, well, that's not a sin. Yeah, I kind of think it's a sin to make somebody, you're supposed to just help people when you can.
Right. That's true.
And as you already referred to, what did he do with the temple? Okay, he made his own whip. I believe it's John's version. He made his own whip, his own scourge to beat people with. And he's overturning, and Christians will say, oh, well, they were practicing usury. They were overcharging. They were really, what's the proof of that? Where does it say that?
Right.
They were making a business. Yeah, they were making a business. But what's wrong with having a business?
Well, buying and selling.
Are they socialist communists?
Well, buying and selling on the Sabbath day at the temple was the claim.
I'm sorry, where does it say it was the Sabbath?
That's a very great point. Okay, but that's the argument. They're saying it was the Sabbath or whatever. Yeah.
Let's pretend it was the Sabbath.
Okay.
That means he's going in to beat people on the Sabbath. Isn't that too a violation of Shabbat?
Wouldn't he?
If it's a violation for the sellers, the money changers, and the sellers of sacrifices to be doing what they're doing on Shabbat, then it would also be a violation of the law, a sin, for him to go in and beat them, overturn tables. So, yeah, he was definitely a sinner. And another thing, okay, why were they there in the first place? What does it say in the Torah? If going to the promised land, if going to Jerusalem on a holy day is too far, take what you have, what you want to sacrifice, sell it, put the money in a bag, carry the bag to the temple, and once you get there, change the money, because you can't use foreign money, you got to change it. So that means that the money changers have to be there, and then buy what you want to sacrifice and have a good life, enjoy yourself. So that means that the money changers have to be there and the sellers of sacrifice have to be there. And since there were certain sacrifices that had to be on Shabbat, then maybe they were supposed to be there on Shabbat too. So there's no violation, okay, if God himself told them they had to be there doing those things. And yet, okay, I think it's John, Jesus makes his own whip and beats people with it. Overturns table and drives out the money changers and the sellers of sacrifice who had to be there according to God. Sounds like a sin to me.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Man comes to him and says, let me follow you. And he says, come and follow me. And he says, well, my dad just died. And he says, well, you don't have to bury them. Let the dead bury the dead. That's not a violation of respect for, honor your father and your mother. So, yes, Jesus was in fact a sinner. Okay. And these are just simple examples that people are probably well aware of in the story of Jesus, but Christians will rationalize and justify their belief that he didn't sin. But yes, Jesus, and again, if Jesus was a human and all humans sin, then why are they upset when people say that Jesus sinned? You can't have it both ways. And the examples that we've given are pretty clear. He didn't own the pigs. He puts the demons in the pigs and then has them jump off a cliff, which is not a really nice way to die, by the way. So, but at any rate, they weren't his pigs. The tree, the fig tree, he cursed simply because it wasn't even a season for figs. So you shouldn't expect to have figs on the tree. And he kills the tree. May nobody ever eat from you again. Okay. And I don't think Jesus was a nice guy.
Yeah. Wow. So what is sin? Sin is
violating the laws
violations of the law. How can one be righteous and still sin? She's probably referring to Jesus in this manner because the whole point is about, was Jesus sinless? How could he be righteous? But
right.
in general, I think the thing, righteousness and perfect could be a little different, but righteousness has to do with
you make a very good point.
Following the method of the law. If you do slip up, if you do sin, you can follow the prescription and get it wiped clean from your record and still be considered righteous.
Exactly.
So, like getting a speeding ticket.
And your distinction between perfection and righteousness is an incredibly good point. It's a very important point. People who sinned were still called righteous even in the Bible. Okay. Job was considered a righteous man. Let's see.
How about Zacharias and Elizabeth, or not Elizabeth? Yeah, Elizabeth in the New Testament.
Right. The New Testament itself. And if Christians believe all human beings sin, they would therefore have been sinners, but they are also called righteous.
Right.
So perfection isn't the same thing as righteousness. His messenger says that the Lord owned the donkeys. Then why did he have to send people in to go get them? You will find 2 donkeys there, and the Lord has need of them. Not the Lord owns them, so I'm just getting them for them, but
Right.
the Lord has need of them. No, it does not say that that Jesus owned the donkeys.
Right.
So, as a matter of fact, I think if I remember correctly, which I may not, but I think that's the first time Jesus entered into Jerusalem.
Right.
And
So
it was the first time he didn't own them.
So MG 8:20 p.m. Can one sin in his or her heart? I'm kind of curious where you're going with your questions, but ideally, yeah, you can meditate on something sinful, and really build up a desire of lust instead of just being tempted is not sinful, But if you invest your energy into creating this video in your head or this account in your head, regardless of what it is that's sinful, then yeah, that would be sinful for you.
By the way, Miriam makes a good point. Oh wait, I don't have the timestamp.
That's okay. Just read off what she said.
She says the pigs committed suicide. She's right. But why would they throw themselves off? Why would they do that? Did Jesus make them insane or something? Or
well, then that means that Jesus is guilty of what do you call it? Vandalism. Because what's vandalism? It's putting trash. Like when you toilet paper somebody's tree at their house, that's considered vandalism. And so if he put what was unclean, which are the spirits, the evil spirits, into somebody else's property, then it's vandalism. So no matter how you slice it, it's still sin.
Yeah, and he didn't own the pigs to begin with, so what right did he have to do that?
Right.
By the way, there's an interesting point. His messenger at 8:07. After the resurrection, Jews became Christians. Even after the resurrection, they were still Jews. And this raises an interesting point. What was the split? If you believe that the earliest Christians were Jews, eventually Judaism and Christianity and Jews and Christians split apart, where nobody considered the Christians to be Jews anymore. And Jews certainly didn't accept the Christians as Jews anymore. So at what point was the split? And there are different, theologians and historians and, commentators disagree on this. It's a good question. I think it split pretty soon after the crucifixion. I think when people had an idea of who the Messiah is and what he's supposed to do, and Jesus failed at it, they had a choice. They could say, oops, we were wrong. Or they could redefine the Messiah to fit what actually happened. And if you've ever read the book When Prophecy Fails, you should read it. It kind of goes into this. It's the study that created the concept of cognitive dissonance. And when Jesus didn't do what he was supposed to do, they redefined the term Messiah in ways that are contradictory to what the Torah says. And I believe that is where the split began, that early in history.
Okay, 8:23 p.m. HWW Broward says just a statement, probably referring to somebody's comment, but his statement is just screaming for attention.
Yes, except Jesus rose from the dead.
Yeah. So what happens when you sacrifice a goat or a dove and it comes back to life? What happens?
It's not much of a sacrifice.
It's not a sacrifice. It's
and
invalid.
Jesus died on a Friday, came back to life on Sunday. So as you've heard me say before, all he did was give up a weekend.
Yeah.
And if you're actually God and you know you're going to be resurrected, what kind of a sacrifice is it? And the pain he suffered on the cross. Really?
Yeah.
His legs were never broken. So the 2 thieves with which he was crucified suffered worse because he never had to go through the pain of broken legs. He was dead and they were still alive. So they suffered longer and they suffered more.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's true.
And by the way, even if Jesus rose from the dead, so did the people that Elijah and Elisha resurrected.
Right.
Does that make them God? Does that make them the Messiah? Does that make them? It doesn't. So,
That's a good question. AB says just now, if Jesus died knowing he would stay dead, do you think he still would have done it?
Yeah, good question.
That's a great question.
Good question.
Good question. Good thinking. Except the two thieves were thieves. Jesus didn't do anything wrong. Well, you must have just tuned in because we just talked about all the sins that Jesus committed. So he definitely did things wrong.
Well, you also have to remember that it was Rome that did the crucifying.
Right.
Okay, the Jews, when they would give somebody the death penalty, it was called stoning.
Right.
So the crucifixion, the New Testament explicitly says that there was a sign placed over the head of Jesus on the cross, and that sign was explicitly called the accusation.
Mm-hmm.
Why was he being crucified? And what did it say? Well, there are actually 4 different versions of what that sign says, because Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John disagree on so many things. But basically it said, this is Jesus Christ, King of the Jews, or this is Jesus, King of the Jews. Okay, or Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. But the point is that why is that an accusation? And the answer is because in the eyes of Rome, if you think this guy is your king, this is what's going to happen to him, because your king is supposed to be the emperor in Rome. So they saw him as a insurrectionist. And by the way, according to Tacitus, Josephus, Philo, according to many historians, crucifixion was explicitly reserved for people trying to overthrow or rebel against Rome. So from the perspective of Rome, who did the crucifying, yeah, they thought he was not so innocent. And by the way, what drew attention to Rome? Having followers? A lot of people back then had followers. But when he starts going into the temple and becoming a rabble-rouser, yeah, they're going to come down real quick, especially if he has followers of multitudes.
If you enjoy this channel and the content, and it has changed your life, or perhaps the life of a loved one or a close friend, would you please consider supporting this work? You can click this link and it'll take you directly to my website with the donate button. Or there's a Patreon link and a mailing address for snail mail if you would prefer. If you do donate, please do me a favor and leave me a phone number where I can contact you and thank you properly. I hope you all have a wonderful 2025. Shalom.